If love were endless and time stood still, there'd be no rush for romance. But since neither is true, we have very little option left. And so does our speaker. So he has only one mission: to outtalk time and to outwit hesitation. He crafts a case for love that is clever, urgent, and, of course, daring. Why wait for eternity when passion is here and now? Stay with me till the end of this video as I take you through Andrew Marvell's brilliantly persuasive To His Coy Mistress. Andrew Marvell belonged to 17th century and he is one of the metaphysical poets who were famous for using extraordinary imagery and conceits. He was a contemporary of John Donne, Herbert, and just like them, he also combined intellect with emotion in his poems. He was also a very prominent political figure and is known to have worked as an assistant of John Milton even. However, he did not express any one particular view and was more of a survivalist, we can say, because the scenario back then was very, very violent. He survived it all. And in his poetry, we find this very unique blend of the political, the classical, and at the same time, the contemporary. This poem was published posthumously, that is, after his death, so we do not know exactly when it was written, but it was written sometime around 1650s, we can say, or assume. And the tone of urgency that we find in this poem is also nourished by the political urgency that he must have felt, which you can understand if you think about the condition of England back then. It was a tumultuous time with the Civil War and then the Puritan government taking charge and all that. So life was getting unpredictable, and no wonder the speaker of this poem has a very focused line of argument that if time is fleeting away, let's make the best use of it. This idea is a direct parallel to the idea of carpe diem. It's a Latin aphorism taken from book 1 of Horace's Odes. Taken literally, it means pluck the day, that is, seize the day. In other words, enjoy the present moment. We will see how this poem, which is like an attempt to convince the lady love that it is not okay to shy away from physical intimacy. We'll see how this poem builds on this idea of carpe diem and other such ideas, and how the speaker tries to convince his lady love that why she should listen to him. So the listener of this poem is a silent woman. We never get to hear her point of view, but we only get to see what the speaker has to say. So it is kind of a dramatic monologue, you can say, where we have a direct address from a speaker. Now, you might think that this speaker is like a persona of Marvel himself, or you might consider him as an independent personality. The speaker begins in a tone of attempting a logical statement. He says, had we but world enough and time, this coyness, lady, were no crime. Coyness means shyness, hesitation, and often shyness in women or silence in women is considered to be a mark of consent. We'll come to a discussion on that later today, but let's just look at certain assumptions that the speaker is making. He's saying that if we had enough time and enough space at our disposal, then this shyness would have been okay. And he's actually using the word crime as if it is like a criminal offense in this lady to refuse his physical proposal or advances because they don't have time or space to waste. And then he gives a series of statements talking about what they would have done if they had unlimited time and space. So these statements are all imaginary ones. Like if he had world enough and time, he would have done this. And this entire first stanza is a list of all those things. The first thing that he would have done or they would have done is we would sit down and think which way to walk and pass our long love's day. So, if they had unlimited time, unlimited space at their disposal, they would just sit down, relax, and keep on thinking because they don't have any rush or urgency because it's never going to end their intimacy. Thou by the Indian Ganges' side shouldst rubies find. Now, why is he suddenly talking about Ganges? If you look at the historical context, this poem was written around the time when Europe was very much into the idea of exploration, finding out trade routes, and all. So, the Orient, which is represented by Ganges. Ganges is a very sacred and powerful symbol of India, we can say. And India is like a metaphor of the exotic, the oriental, the other. Okay. So he's saying that if you had unlimited time and space, you could be in India collecting rubies by Indian Ganges side. And I don't know how these people got this idea that there are rubies scattered along the sides of the Ganges, but that was the way the Orient was framed in the mind of the Europeans. And while she would do that, what would he do? I, by the tide of Humber, Humber is another river. It is a river and it happens to run through Marvell's native Hull. I, by the tide of Humber, would complain. What would he complain? That she is not saying yes. While we see that he is using Ganges when he is speaking of the beloved, he is talking about Humber when he is talking about his actions. Ganges as a river has this aura of being unlimited, grand, okay, vast. In contrast, Humber is a very homely kind of a river. It's not like Thames or Avon or those prominent rivers we hear of, but it's a very homely kind of a river. So the distance between Ganges and Humber is not just geographical, but it is also metaphorical. It's a distance which is felt on the level of vastness of Ganges and the smallness of Humber. So he wants to mean that when we are in opposite extremes, not just geographically, but also metaphorically, it would have been okay because we would have world enough and time. I would love you 10 years before the flood, and you should, if you please, refuse till the conversion of the Jews. He refers to two biblical events. Number one, that is the Noah's flood. It is a very important event in the Bible and is supposed to mark the beginning of the new world. Like the old world was destroyed, then the flood came, and Noah survived along with the animals he took in his ark. So that is the story of the flood. So 10 years before the flood means a long time back. Okay, almost prehistoric. So he's saying that if I had world enough and time, I would love you 10 years before the flood because we would have been immortal. Up to which point? Up to some imaginary future when all the Jews would convert to Christianity. Now, since it's not very expected of Jews to convert to Christianity because we know about the animosity between the two religion and the idea that all the Jews will become Christians is something very unimaginable. And even if it would happen in some great future. Like it would not happen sometime in near future. So Marvell is saying that, or rather the speaker is saying that if he had unlimited space and time under his command, he would love this lady from the beginning of time almost to the end of it, and she can still go on refusing him because it wouldn't have mattered. My vegetable love should grow faster than empires and more slow. Again, a direct reference to the idea of empires expanding. We also know that this is a time right after which we have a lot of colonial expansion everywhere. It was like the time of the rise of the empires once again for Europe. So he is saying that if I didn't have to rush because of time and space, I would have let my love grow like a vegetable. Now, there are a number of interpretations of this idea of vegetable love, what he actually means by it. Normally, we can say that, taken routinely, it's an allusion to the doctrine of the three souls. We have three aspects of our souls: vegetative, sensitive, and the rational, which means that we live on these three levels. Vegetative means something which is physical, something which is not spiritual, which doesn't have that additional thing which animals have, vegetative. But this idea of vegetative is also something which is very timeless. Like it is not dependent on things which limit human activities. And you just have to imagine the way a creeper grows all along, or the weeds grow all along. So, vegetable love is something which lacks a human element in it and is more like a physical love. And that is the paradox here, because he's saying, on one hand, if he had world enough and time, he would not rush things. And at the same time, he's saying that his love would grow like a vegetable. And there are again interpretations connecting this idea of vegetable love to erotic experience. But I think that is a little bit far fetched. So I would rather stick to the idea of vegetable love as something which is growing at a slow pace and is like a parodic variant of the Petrarchan idea of love as something very spiritual. Okay, it's against that idea. The words grow, slow, vaster, these create through these long drawn vowel sounds the idea of leisure, the idea of not rushing into things, the idea of unidirectional growth, and to some extent boredom, right? And then what he would have done? An 100 years should go to praise thine eyes, and on thy forehead gaze. 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest. I don't know if you're familiar with this very, very popular Hindi song, which, well, we are of past generation, so it was during our times. And the lyric goes like this: 100 साल तक सनम की आंखों में डूब जाऊं, 100 साल और हो तो उसको गले लगाओ. I think this guy completely got the thing from Marvel. So if you know about that song, you tell me in the comments. It's from the movie Fir Teri Kahani Yaad Aayi. So the idea is that usually the Petrarchan style of writing is about glorifying the beloved. And usually Petrarchan poets or courtly love tradition followers, they do not mind the fact that the lady love is not attainable. They rather celebrate the thing that she is out of reach. And that makes her all the more mysterious, beautiful. And they go on describing the lady love, her eyes, her physical aspects. All right. So Marvel is completely against it. And the speaker says that if I had world enough in time, then I would have been a Petrarchan lover. I would have praised you for hundreds of years. And then the way he is picking up each and every body part, and thankfully stops after he mentions adore each breast, because when he says 30,000 to the rest, it's like he is in a hurry. He doesn't even want to waste time listing down what he would have done if he had unlimited time. This would also mean the urgency is growing now in him. And to the rest is possibly the more private aspects of the female body, which he doesn't mention here. The point is, if he had unlimited time and space, he would have written poems after poems after poems of persuasion, and it would have been okay if she refused constantly. An age at least to every part, and the last age should show your heart. So, if I had unlimited time, finally I would reach a point when you would tell me what you really want. That is, show your heart. For lady, you deserve this date. You deserve this kind of a treatment. You are so grand, but I don't have unlimited time, Nor would I love at lower rate. And my love is also not any less passionate than those Petrarchan poets who keep on praising their lady love. And so don't think that I'm not writing you so many poems means I don't love you. He tries to say how more intense his love is, and he would rather do all these things if he had the opportunity. But, and then we have the second stanza starting with but, which is like he is giving a counter logic to his first statement. You have this poem in three stanzas, and this is the structure of a syllogism. Syllogism is, it is a pattern in logic or logical argument where you give two statements which are called premises, and from that you derive a conclusion. Okay, and based on the connection between the premises and the conclusion, the logic of the statement is established. So the first statement is given in the first stanza. What is given in the first stanza is the first statement or proposition. That is, someone having unlimited time can love in this manner. All right. And the second stanza gives a counter statement, and it starts with but, which means, but I don't have unlimited time. And how does he write it? But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near. Suddenly the tone changes from this mischievous, light-hearted one to something very grim and serious, and it starts with but. So it's not just an inversion of the statement, but also an inversion of the tone. And he says that he's always hearing that time is rushing at him, and time is on a chariot. And this whole idea of time chasing us is also connected to the idea of death chasing us. In this context, I want you to know that T.S. Eliot, in his masterpiece, The Wasteland, uses these lines as an allusion. And this shows the intensity that these lines usually generate, that the kind of urgency, somebody is chasing you. And you will notice that when you look at the word time, you're actually looking at death. And yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. So at your back you have time rushing at you, chasing you, and in front of you you see that you're going to end up in eternity. Yes, after life, but that is a desert. And there is a sharp contrast between the idea of vegetable love, growth, and here you have desert. And in both contexts, he's using the word vast. Vaster than empire and more slow in case of vegetable love, and here the deserts are vast. So the idea of vastness is containing everything that he wants to run away from. He rather wants to celebrate the momentary, completely opposite to the idea of vastness. He's not celebrating vastness, he is fearful of it. Yonder means there, so he can actually see that the future is quite bleak. Thy beauty shall no more be found. Instead of glorifying her beauty, he's actually talking about the end of the beauty or end of physical existence. Nor in thy marble vault shall sound my echoing song. Now, he makes a very clever use of this expression marble vault, which can actually mean two things. On one hand, it might mean the marble tomb, okay, which is built on a coffin as a memorial. And he means that after your death, in that structure of marble, you will be lying, but my voice will not be heard there. That is the primary meaning. But marble vault may also refer to the body of the beloved. because she is so fair and white. So her body is compared to a marble, which is a very common trope, common um, imagery we find in Elizabethan poetry, which he is using here. And then he is subverting it. He is saying that your body is like a marble vault, but my song, which is now echoing in you, will not echo after your death because you will not be able to hear it. And what would happen then after she dies? Then worms shall try that long preserved virginity. Again, long preserved. Very much similar to the word vast. Virginity or chastity in women, which is actually celebrated by many people or poets, here is considered to be a liability. That is, you have preserved your body, you have not let any man get intimate with you sexually. It is as if you're preserving yourself, your virginity. And now, after death, what will happen? The worms will start eating all your body parts, which includes the private parts. So, well, you will not be a virgin anymore. And this is so creepy an idea that how would the lady love react? She would think that, okay, a man is better than a worm. So let me say yes. This is his logic. So worms shall try. And look at the word try here. It is so offensive. It's like she is going to be food and just something the worms will try on. There is no emotion, there is no love, but simple disintegration of the body, harsh reality. And your quaint honor, the honor which you are so proud of, your so pretty, charming honor. So he's kind of making fun of that word too. What will happen to that honor which you're trying to preserve because you don't want to sleep with me? It will turn to dust. And into ashes all my lust. So, not just she, he is also going to end in a very bad way because his lust, his desire will have no success. So, it will turn to dust. And then a very grim humor coming from the speaker. The grave is a fine and private place. Now, well, it's a private place. You don't share it with anybody, first of all. And because your body is going to turn into fine dust, so it's a fine place. But none, I think, do dare embrace. So you don't have the option of any kind of company or lovemaking inside the grave. So life is the only time we can hope for any kind of intimacy. Death is only about alienation. Death is only about turning into dust all by yourself. So this comes the second proposition. That is, if I had world enough and time, I would have wasted all my time. But I don't have world enough and time. Death is chasing us. Therefore, we should do something. So the conclusion comes in the third stanza. And this third stanza is one of the most complicated stanzas you'll come across. Now, therefore, so you note how he begins the stanza, exactly shaped like a syllogism. Now, therefore, while the youthful hue is color, so while you are still young, while the youthful hue sits on thy skin, when you are young, your skin shows your youth, you blush and you are full of youthful color. So, that is what he's referring to. While the youthful hue sits on thy skin like morning dew, in some of the versions, it was believed that he had used the word glue instead of dew. So, whatever it is, it means the same that while you are young, while you are looking fresh and pretty, and while thy willing soul. So, he thinks that the lady love actually wants to be with him, wants to be intimate. Now, we don't know whether she really wants to be with him or he thinks she wants to be with him. Either way, we don't have an option to find out the truth. We have to take it at face value that she is willing. And how does he know that she is willing? By certain signals from her features. While thy willing soul transpires, so her soul is transpired. Transpiration means sweating. So she has this sweat on her skin, which makes him feel that she wants to be with him. be intimate with him. At every pore with instant fires. So it's like she is looking very fiery on desire. Now let us sport us while we may. So he is using this word now more than once. The sense of urgency is growing. Till now, he was in a philosophical mood, trying to establish a scenario. And suddenly, he begins to talk about action. So, there is a kind of a transition from contemplation to action, from thought to activity. And he says, now let's do something. And let's do what? Now let us sport us while we may. This idea of sporting, game, playing with each other, this is associated with the idea of desire. In Paradise Lost, I want you to know this. After Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, they indulged in play. Milton uses this word play two times. Play, game, sport, this is all about desire. It has nothing to do with reproduction or the bestial aspects of sexuality, but something where there is an expression of desire and also a kind of equal participation. You cannot sport unless the other person is also playing with you. And this kind of gives us this feeling that maybe that woman was enthusiastic as well, but silent. So he says that let us sport us. And there is something sinister about this word. If you are a devout Christian, you would find this poem offensive because from the very first moment he is referring to Noah and conversion, and now this whole idea of love making, prioritizing sexuality, all these things would be very offensive if you are a devout Christian. But he is breaking a lot of conventions here, and he is prioritizing desire, just like John Donne. If you have read the canonization, Good Morrow, I have already covered those poems. And if you haven't read them, I would advise you to go and watch those videos too, although they might not be in your syllabus, but they all form a part of a dialogue that the metaphysical poets were making with the world. That we are going to look at life differently, physicality differently. We are not going to associate physicality with shame. And now, like amorous birds of prey. Usually, amorous birds refer to lovebirds. And when you think of lovebirds, you think of pigeon, dove, like soft, sweet birds. Maybe the birds which pull the chariot of Venus, the god of love. So that kind of an idea comes to our mind. But he uses a kind of oxymoron right after this when he says amorous birds of prey. Birds of prey means the eagle, the kite, the owl. You don't associate romance with them. Strength, yes. Power, yes. Romance, no. He wants to specifically act like amorous bird of prey. And he's not just talking about himself, he's talking about the lady love as well. So he is re-establishing the idea of lovemaking and completely going against this idea of romantic, tender, soft, emotional intimacy. He is straight away talking about violently engaging in the act of intimacy. Why? Because in order to revolt against something, you need to be violent. You need to scream out loud against whatever is boring, whatever is vast, timeless, and threatening you with mortality. He thinks that if I also become as lethargic as eternity, I will not be able to achieve anything in this relationship. And he says, rather at once our time devour than languish in his slow chapped power. Time is repeatedly personified in this poem. And here he is not just talking about carpe diem, but he actually talks about another concept, which is tempus edax rerum. It means time devours everything. Usually, time devours everything means time consumes everything. No matter what happens, it falls prey to time. But here in this statement, he is saying we will devour time. So the only way to fight back something is to actually become that. So if you want to conquer time, you will have to act like time and you have to devour time. And how do you do that? Let us roll all our strength and all our sweetness. Now, he's again just like Donne. Donne has done this in canonization, that we are the dove and the eagle, and he's not specifying who is what. Here also, he is not specifying who is representing strength, who is representing sweetness. He is saying our strength and our sweetness. So here also, he achieves a kind of an equality. Both of them will be participating in this game of love. And when they participate equally and they become one, just like we have in Donne's poem, and he becomes one with the beloved, and they become like this one ball. And ball is like, it's a microcosm of this world. And the sphere or the ball is supposed to be a very perfect shape. And this idea of the globe, the ball, the world, all these ideas are also present in John Donne. And this obsession with a perfect sphere as a symbol of indestructible structure, something which you cannot destroy because it is so strongly built. How is that achieved? That is achieved through true union. So he's saying that if we can ignore time, if we can engage in intimacy and unite and combine our sweetness and strength, then we can achieve a kind of indestructible state, like a ball, like a cannonball, which when thrown at a gate or something, it will crash through it. And then he actually says, and tear our pleasures with rough strife. Look at the words he is using: tear, rough. And then previously he had used the words roll. So he's talking about action, he's talking about aggression, going against every convention of the Petrarchan sonnets, and says he wants to tear his pleasure through the iron gates of life. So now that they have transformed into a ball, like a cannonball, they can demolish the iron gates of life. And what are the iron gates of life? There had been multiple interpretations. Some people have interpreted it as the actual reproductive organs of women, the entry points of physical intimacy. Some people have said no, they represent the iron gates of hell, which is also like the gate of life, because a gate separates the two worlds, and they will be breaking through that gate to enter into the zone of immortality. Doesn't matter what interpretations are, the idea is, or the focus is not on the iron gates, but how they will be through them. So going through something is like transformation. So she will be transformed from a shy virgin into a complete woman through the breaking down of those iron gates. So the point is, the iron gates most possibly represent the finality of death, because the gate of life means where life ends, where death begins. So it is also the gate of death. What he is saying is, we'll not wait for that gate to come, or rather, we'll not wait for life to take us to that gate. We will rush. So what we cannot control, we will rush. And that same idea comes in the last two lines. Thus, though we cannot make our sun stand still, yet we will make him run. Our sun. Look at the private nature of the relationship he feels he has with the sun. Sun means life, time, because sun represents the day. So we cannot make our day stop. But if we are making love to each other, then we'll not feel how the day passes away. It happens, right? When you are in love and you're with the person you love, sharing an intimate moment, time flies. So the same idea is brought in here, that we cannot control time, we can make it simply rush away. I don't care. So it is not that he is wishing for unlimited time and space. He is rather celebrating the fact that he does not have unlimited time and space, and that gives him the opportunity to justify the sexual union which he wants so much. This kind of a tone of boredom when he talks about what he would have done if he had unlimited time and space, because that would have given the beloved justification of refusing him. That, you have time, I'll refuse you. And he's rather celebrating the fact that they don't have unlimited time and space. So you can say it is carpe diem, yes, but it's also a subversion of carpe diem. In carpe diem, you have this idea that, oh God, time is flying away, what to do, let's celebrate. He is saying that thank God time is running away, so we have every reason to celebrate. So it's a kind of a subverted carpe diem, but yes, very much of the same sentiment. Now, this idea of stopping the sun, again, this is taken from the Bible. It refers to or alludes to the episode of Joshua. This expression, make our sun stand still. Joshua stopped the sun to participate in an otherworldly superhuman scheme that is beyond the scope of earthly people. So Joshua went on to do things which is not part of our worldly reality, because in our worldly reality we cannot stop time, we cannot stop the sun. So these kinds of biblical intertext, it goes on. Intertextuality is part of metaphysical poetry, and this is why Eliot was a fan of the metaphysical poets. Now, coming to this idea of syllogism again, apparently it might look like a very well constructed logical argument that if we had world enough in time, we would have wasted it, but we don't have it, so we cannot waste it. Fine. What is wrong with this syllogism? If you are given this question that analyze it as a syllogism, you will say, yes, structurally it is a syllogism. But logically, you see, the second stanza says that the lady is supposed to face death. Fine. But there is an assumption that the lady has no other lover. Like if you are saying to a woman that, see, if you don't say yes to me, you will die a virgin. That means what? You have assumed that that lady will never have any other lover, either you or the worms. So this is not logical. You are forcing that on her. That you have only two options, me or the worms. But she can have so many other options. Number one. Number two, she can also choose to die a virgin. What's wrong in that? I mean, one can be devoted to God. One can simply decide to be asexual, remain away from sexuality, right? And in today's context, one can even choose to be a lesbian. Why does she have to choose him? Because the worms are going to eat her up after a death when she won't even realize the kind of any kind of pain. This is a fallacy here. Second fallacy, which I feel you must know, is that when you make a statement in a syllogism or as a premise, if you invert it, then it should be still logically acceptable. For instance, man has eyes, he can see. And the opposite is, if man had no eyes, he would not see. Fine. Now, in the first stanza, he is saying, if I had world enough in time, I would not rush. This is his statement. Now you invert it. That I would rush since I have no time. But the whole thing is all about him, how he would act. How can he say that his beloved is also going to feel the same? So he is imposing what he thinks is his point of view on her. And then you notice one more thing here, that it somehow condones a predatory male behavior. You might question these things as if you are making a feminist reading or attempting a feminist reading of this poem. What about the female voice? What about female consent? Is silence always about consent? The fact that he guesses her desire is again left for us to decide whether we are going to believe him or not, right? Because if we are to believe every speaker of dramatic monologue, then we should also believe in what the speaker in My Last Duchess says, Duke of Ferrara, about his wife. So the element of doubt will always be there, at least to modern or postmodern readers. But back in those days, this acted as a very persuasive poem, or looked like a very persuasive poem with a very strong logical backbone. And Marvel's poems are usually shaped as mimicking, I would say mimicking, because it is like imitating the syllogistic pattern, but with lots of fallacies. And if you think that this idea of worms eating into her body is very new, that's not very new. He is actually reiterating the epigram of Asclepiades, and it goes like this: Thou grudgest thy maidenhead, what avails it? When thou goest to Hades, Hades is hell, thou shalt find none to love thee there. The joys of love are in the land of the living, but in Acheron, dear virgin, we shall lie dust and ashes. So, this idea is not very novel, but the way he is putting the urgency in it and placing it like an option between worms and a lover, this is something very new and unique. And this urgency is also understood when you look at the meter of the poem. It is written in iambic meter, but it is not pentameter. Pentameter gives you that slow cadence of Petrarchan sonnets. And even in Donne, we see the use of iambic pentameter, especially in poems like Good Morrow, which has a lazy flow about it. But here it is so urgent that he cannot afford to write in pentameter, like five divisions. No, he takes up tetrameter to show that urgency in a way by shorter lines. But he keeps it iambic. There are variations to this, right in this poem itself, where he doesn't follow the iambic tetrameter pattern, but it is predominantly in iambic tetrameter. And this whole style of using rhyming couplets, that is, two consecutive lines rhyming with each other, this gives it an added sense of urgency, like it's like a heroic beat going on. Okay, so he is using all these additional poetic devices in order to communicate the urgency and in order to establish that for him, the real world experience, real intimacy is way better than even immortality, which is assured or represented through vast deserts. The iron gates, on one hand, represent the gate of life and death, and it might also represent social censor, social constraints, restrictions, conventions imposed by society, which stop you from reaching your goal. So it's like the lover wants to break conventional mortality and at the same time the conventions of literature available to him. And through this double usage of carpe diem and tempus edex rerum, he beautifully crafts this poem, which manages to sound as quite compelling a persuasion for a lady love. The questions which you should prepare are whether it's structured like a syllogism, what are the metaphysical conceits in the poem. We have already discussed about the idea of syllogism. Speaking of metaphysical conceits, you can talk about a lot of things here, references to Ganges, Humber, biblical references, then the idea of time, rushing on a chariot. At the same time, the marble vault, this whole idea of body as vault, and of course, amorous birds of prey. All these are metaphysical conceits you can talk about. You can talk about iron gates of life and the idea of rolling up into one ball. And you can show how these conceits expand the scope of the poem. Okay. You can also be asked a question or analyze it as a love poem or a poem of persuasion. Then you can, well, write whatever you feel about it. But you should mention that the consent of the woman is taken for granted and is interpreted by certain signs or signals which might also be because of fear or being uncomfortable. You do sweat when you feel uncomfortable in a situation, you suffocate. So it's not always desire that leads to sweating, and he takes it that way. So you do talk about these things also, the doubts that are raised, if doubts are raised in your mind. But at the end of it, we can take it as a light hearted poem, and it is very much in line with the way Shakespeare also gives this kind of an idea about the importance of realizing love through physical intimacy. So it's not something very objectionable. When you love someone, it's okay to persuade them, but then you should also be aware of what the other person really wants. So I hope we have covered most of the important aspects of this poem, and you are more than ready to face your exams. And if you have seen this video just out of curiosity, I'm even more grateful for that. Keep commenting, stay subscribed, and I'll meet you soon again with a new video. This is Monami Mukherjee signing off. Bye bye.